So we've moved on to step 3, which is the design phase, and it will be split up a bit. We're going to do step 3, 3A, and 3B, where we're going to place the first 6 hexagons. And again, thank you for joining us. Laura Bosma, your stitching host with the Southeastern Quilt and Textile Museum Fun in the Sun Summer Camp Project number 4, the Sea Turtle. So when we left off, we had found the center of this particular fat quarter. Fat quarter, I have no idea who measured it or who named it, but basically this lengthwise here is about 20 or 22 inches, and the width here is about 18 inches. It is a quarter of a yard. It just isn't a linear quarter of a yard. So I guess that's why they call it a fat quarter. Remember that this center point remains important for designing this. I'm going to pull these back into my field, again, way back in step number 2. I don't quite know where to put them. We figured out how to order them from light to dark. I know you can't see them all, but there they are. All right, so I'm going to take what would have been my number 1, the one that I thought was lightest. I'm going to remove the waste paper. That becomes trash. Sometimes it's in a couple of pieces, so I've got another little piece to take off. And then here it is. It is sticky fusible. You know which side has stickum because it hangs onto your finger. Some people have joined us for the first time with this 4th project, and they're going to need to hear some things that the rest of you are already experts at. So if this is my number 1 triangle, I'm going to go ahead for right now anyway and place it in the center. And different than what my instructions stated, I don't actually want you to put it like that where you're to what would be the left of the center. I want you to come up and probably cover that 1/4 inch mark. So I'm actually 1/4 of an inch to the right of my marked and then pressed center. And then I'm just going to eyeball it. Am I, halfway between here? Is my line running this way? Is my line running that way? And then at this point, I want you to find your imaginary source of light. It could be coming from here. It could be coming from here. It could be coming from here. It's truly a personal taste thing, but what I want to do, and I think my photo on your direction sheet shows it the best, I want to concentrate lighter hexagons and elongated hexagons where it would be lightest, where my source of light is, and then those that would be farther away from what my imaginary source of light is, I would want those to be on what would be considered the darker side. So I'm going to determine that my light source is here. So I've placed my very first one. And then if you look at the diagram, and I do have a little, it's on the next to the folded page of your sea turtle, you'll note that there's a center hexagon, and then there are 6 around it. If you can isolate that in your eye view, basically looks like a flower with a center. All right, so I'm going to remove the waste paper again. It might be a whole piece of waste paper. It might be a couple of smaller pieces, but you need to get rid of all of it. I always encourage you, don't place them all on here with the paper on them, because you've got to pick them back up and take the paper off. Take it off as you apply them, and they're like a sticker. They're repositionable wherever you want until we fuse them down, and we're not there yet. So you just kind of put them where you think they should go, and then you can always fix it. Now, if my light source is over here somewhere, then I want, this to be there or there. For right now, I'm going to put it here. I am also asking you to place these 1/4 of an inch away from each other at least. So I've got a small little ruler to help me facilitate that. You can use a ruler. If you don't like using a ruler, then I'm going to recommend that you create something old-fashioned word, create a jig. And a jig, I don't exactly have one here, but you'll just have to imagine that my little arrow there is 1/4 of an inch wide. I probably should trim it to that. And then that would be my spacer. I would put that there as a way to determine how close to keep my hexagons. I'm going to trim this baby a little bit so I can exactly use it as that. All right, so I've trimmed him down and he's my spacer. He got a little bit skinny. Why do I want you to leave that? First of all, it's easier to stitch if there's a space from one hexagon to another. Secondly, if you're going to come back and machine or hand quilt the overall pattern between here, when you do that, believe it or not, they suck in and they get closer. So we're going to mitigate all that by having them 1/4 of an inch away. It also, I think, is just an interesting design property to keep them away. So I'm just going to continue. Again, we're placing our first 6 hexagons, trying to concentrate the light perhaps in one area or one side, lighter pieces of the hexagons, and then darker ones. Now I'll go back when I'm off screen and make sure that these are at least my 1/4 inch apart, but in interest of time, I'm going to try and speed up just a little bit. And they're starting to get darker. Note that nobody's sea turtle kit is exactly the same. When I hand dye wools, and I'm sure it's the same for those that hand dye cottons as well, it is what I call a very serendipitous process. If you don't know the word serendipity, you need to go look it up. It means that you just never know. I never get 2 wools to come out the same. No matter how hard I try, no matter how much I measure, no matter how I keep my dyeing, which is basically a science experiment, no matter how hard I try to keep all the variables the same, they're different. It just is what it is. So there's an example of me placing my first 6 hexagons. I've got a second one. It's got a little bit of a yellow drip in it. Again, it's just how the dye diffused out into the dye bath and attacked the wool. That's a good word, attack, and became permanent with the wool. Maybe you like it to have a lot of variation like this one and this one, so maybe you want to edit that one out and put this one in. Again, it's totally a personal taste, but I want you to think about wild turtles. I guess they're turtles. Sea turtles would definitely be considered wild. They have predators. Their shells are not going to be perfect. Whether they have had a mishap with a seafaring vessel or a predator, they've got bites out of them and nicks and scrapes and scars, and luckily they're still viable because their shell is pretty strong, but it gives you an idea that our shells are not going to be perfect. They're going to look different across the board. So there you have it. We have done the placing of our first 6 hexagons, and I'll pick it back up with